what's also weird about this camera? You can't get your hand between the viewfinder, and I've never had a camera like that, ever.
The old Sony M3 was like that.
Oh, I scarcely remember the M3. I mean, you know, I remember using it because
same problem. Man.
Because Charles had an M3A.
Mm-hmm. Still does. It's up at Alex's now.
Oh, really? Right. That's where it is.
Yes. Okay.
My name is Basha Rosemarin from home. Now I am called Bella, and my present name is Rubin. I was born in Poland, in the city of Sosnowiec, where 25,000 Jews were living in our city. I come from a family of business people, which were called in that time upper middle class. My great-grandfather was already one of the first people when the city started to build itself, and his name was Fischel, Hashmaya Fischel, and I have here his picture, if you would like to see. This is my great-grandfather, and this is my great-grandmother. This is my grandfather, Chaim Fischel. This is my grandmother, Henka Fischel from home, Janowski. She was born in Wolbrom, a little city. This is my mother, shortly after liberation, Esther Rosemarin. This is my father, Hersh Berek Rosemarin, whom I found after the war. And this is here in United States, my mother. Many years later, she went back to her religion because she was an Orthodox woman. We were from an Orthodox family. I am from a family of 8 children. I was the 4th. My oldest brother, his name is Menek, he went through concentration camp. He was very wounded, and he was found after a year in a English hospital in Germany, close to Celle. Then my second sister, Rachel Leah Rosemarin, and she was also in Auschwitz, and she was then in marching death going to Bergen-Belsen with my mother. She found my mother in Auschwitz, and we separated in a hiding place. The other children were taken together with my mother to Auschwitz. It was September 2nd.
Would you go back a little bit to your home life?
Okay.
So then we get a feeling for
that. My grandparents had a building department, building store. My father was a businessman. He had a textile store, and besides this, he was a businessman delivering coals to a steel industry. My mother helped him in the business. We were a very, very happy family of 8 children. We were Orthodox family, and we got, all of us got education. My older brother got a higher education. My mother sent him to Krakow. My second brother, which I have here, his name is Lolek. He was killed. He got the business school, and he was killed. He was 17 in 1943. He was killed coming out of the bunker. This was my second sister, Miriam. She was just 13 years old. She was killed in Auschwitz, taken and burned together the first day of deportation. This was my little brother, Kalman Hilush, and he was, together with my mother, taken to Auschwitz, and the same day burned alive in the gas chambers. with the rest of this was my youngest sister, Doreczka. It was called Voira. And she was also taken together with the rest of my sisters to Auschwitz and burned nearly alive. And they were taken away from my mother's hands. They separated them separately. My mother looked very young, and they separated the children from my mother. My father also went separate. And they, in Auschwitz, they didn't see each other, my mother and my father. They didn't know later on about each other. We had a very good youth, happy life, well brought up. We attended the school, and for us was really something that we got a good education and good home.
Public
and when
school
the war,
or Jewish school?
What?
A public school
well, we
or
were,
Jewish school?
Yeah, we weren't allowed to go to Polish school. In our town, Sosnowiec, they were Jewish high schools. We weren't allowed to go to the Polish schools. And even the elementary school, which was supported by the government, we had to go separately to the Jewish school. We never could mingle with the Polish children. So there were two schools, one on Dęblińska, which belonged to our section of the city. City was divided like in two parts, Old Sosnowiec and New Sosnowiec. And the other, New Sosnowiec, was another Jewish elementary school, which was on Ostrogórska. And we seldom met these children because it was like two divided city, which wasn't really, but it was a little distance, and we could never go to the other school, and they could never come to our school.
Did you ever have contact with the Polish children?
Well, the Polish children were very hostile. We were really very afraid many times to walk on the street at night. We avoided them because, we got stones in our head. And when we were in park, we never played with Polish children because they really were just fed with a lot of anti-Semitism in the churches. They were told that we killed Jesus, and they were running after other children, throwing stones and saying, "You killed Jesus." And we didn't understand why they are saying, "I wouldn't kill a fly, and how could I kill somebody human and a saint?" Which I knew because we had maids and we had help in our house. And they sometimes, to us as children, they used to say, you know, our priest says that you killed Jesus. Did you kill it? I said, we wouldn't kill anybody because in our religion we are not allowed to kill anybody. We respect everybody, and I don't know, we suffer for nothing. And you know, they got used to my saying, to my sister saying, but inside them they always look at us, especially when the holiday Pesach came. So we really felt it on the street. And I, as a child, it was very shortly before the war, like 2 years before the war, right under our windows, there was a pogrom. They caught people, and they cut the neck of my uncle. I have here his picture. His name was Itzrik. A younger brother of my mother. They cut him here the neck with a blade, and they started to invade the stores, break the windows, and we were upstairs. We then lived on Piłsudskiego 50. It was the old Sosnowiec, and we looked through the window. We couldn't even look out. We were scared, but we saw it was very close. It was on Piłsudskiego, and they let no police came, which police was only maybe 3 short blocks from us. There was the station of the police. After an hour, a lot of Jewish people were on the floor bleeding, and then I saw police coming on the horses, arriving and chasing away, but they didn't arrest not one person. The next day we got very scared. Nobody opened the store because we lived in the same house where our store was. So our store wasn't invaded, but they were across a lot of stores, and across our house was a park where we used to play. And then for a week, we were scared to go out because we didn't know what the next day will bring. And we grew up in a city around the Polish people. There were some very good people too. I cannot generalize it, but I am talking about general attitude of the Polish people, which I nearly lost my life when I went out of the hiding, and I was caught by a Polish in the bushes. And I just prayed he should give me a little bit of water after 11 days of hiding. And he looked at me and he said, "You are Jew. You will go and be killed like the rest of them." And he caught my hair. I couldn't walk in that time from the bushes. And because it was harvest, it was everything cut. My knee were bleeding. I couldn't stand on my feet because 11 days I didn't eat, I didn't drink. So I was crawling, but not walking. So he pulled me with one hand. He carried his bicycle that he went to work. And he came back to look for me because I saw he didn't want to give me the water. And I ran back to the bushes to hide myself again because I saw that I hit the wrong man. And he found me. He pulled me down where I crawled the whole night from the hiding to come to the Polish side and to run away. He brought me back to the Gestapo, and I was sure I will be shot. But I will not continue now. I will continue when I was in hiding. So this was until the war broke out. When the war broke out, we were all together.
How old were you then?
14. I was 14 years old when the war broke out. And I just started my high school. And my father sent us all he believed in education. So my sister continued because in Poland, you couldn't, if you couldn't afford, you couldn't go to a high school. You could only finish elementary school. And if you were on stipendium, then the city or the school send you 1 or 2 students from the whole. So for Jews, even if they were very, very skilled, very intelligent, if they didn't have the means, they couldn't follow the higher education. And if their father was a shoemaker, they had to stay as a shoemaker. If the father was a hairdresser, they had to stay. Only the people that could afford to pay their education could continue to go to a high school or to the university, which also in Poland was very restricted. Some people went to Sorbonne or to England because they felt a lot of anti-Semitism in the university. So there were very few, which I heard of, that went. My brother didn't attend the school. My oldest brother, my mother gave him private tutoring for each subject, another teacher, and by 6 months, he went to Krakow, to the school which was called Wiedza, and he had to give up the exam because he was very, very religious, and he wanted to be doctor, rabbi. So he needed a higher education and college and university. So he gave up the exams every half a year, and they didn't allow him to have a cover hat. So he went only for the exam and came back home. So that's how the schooling looked in Poland in that time. And when the war broke out, we took a wagon. We heard that it will be very bad because we heard already from Germany what was going on. And we decided to run away to a very little town.
What did you hear was going on?
That we heard that for the Jews, they are really restricted and they are shut upon, and a lot of German Jews that had any background from Poland or their parents were from Poland, they were sent to our city, which was called Zbąszyn. From Zbąszyn, they accumulated them in the city Zbąszyn, And all of a sudden we heard that the people from Germany, from the city of Zbomshin, arrived to our city, but it was already when the Germans were inside, not before. And around our city, people ran away like Königscity, and it was not far from our city. So when we heard, my father decided to go to a very small town away from the city of Sosnowiec, because our city was an industry, coal and mines were in our city. And my father figured out, he was a very, very smart man and pretty known in our city. They respected his opinion and his name. And my grandfather, Chaim Fischl, the same way. He spoke beautifully Polish. He has connection to very high official in Poland because his father was already there. And he came from 11 sons. And every son got like big lands, and they built on the lands. My grandfather's brothers. So it was a pretty known name in Sosnowiec. When my grandfather heard that we are leaving the city to run away, he was like heartbroken. How could you leave? But he understood that my father with 8 children shouldn't sit when the first entrance of the army will come and they might shoot everybody, because we heard about a lot of shooting. So my father took the wagon, and we all, with a little bit belongings, what we had, and we started our trip through the little town. We arrived to Wolbrom. When we arrived, we already just one day and they were in. So we were very lucky, but it didn't last too long. In a couple of days, we heard that they are entering Wolbrom, and they are shooting every man that they are coming across. So we were, by my aunt, also Rosemary, she gave us a hiding place below where she lived. All the men were downstairs, and my mother with the children and the rest of the family, we were standing by the gate, because if we wouldn't open the gate, they will shoot. They came with tanks, and they came on motorcycles.
The Germans?
The Germans, yes. And it was like on September, I think September the 1st, I don't remember, but it was to Sosnowiec. They came like on Monday afternoon, and in that day we were in Wolbrom. So my father decided after 2-3 days we have to come out, because we were 8 children. We couldn't be in a small, there was only one big kitchen and a little corner. People lived very limited in the little town. So, and she had chicken farm. And we weren't used, we were from a town. So the smell, and you know, it was different. It was beautiful. She received us, and she didn't mind we are staying. But my father decided to look for an apartment of our own. And my mother went out to look, and she found a room. And it took only one day, and the next day, next to our door, they arrived soldiers dressed like Polish, and below they had the SS uniforms. They spoke inside. When I came, one of them didn't have a button, and he knocked at our door and asked if there's somebody who could sew the button. And I volunteered, and I went to the room next to our one room in Wolbrom, and they were sitting in black uniforms and speaking German with a lot of money, cases of money around. And I came out and I said to my mother, it's going on something. They came as Polish, probably we are now surrounded. And this is what happened. The same day we heard that they took all the people from Wolbrom, any men they met, and they put them on the place, like a gathering place. They put them, this is where my uncle was living. He was over there. My grandmother's brother was living in this city. So we came over there too. So I have from two sides relatives. And we got very scared because we figured out in a little city, if they can do this, maybe in a bigger city is much more safer. And then after a week, we didn't stay anymore like a week. We put a scarf over my father. Nobody should recognize that he's a man. We put him here a scarf. We rented a car, again the same, and my brother, and we put them completely below. We all girls were sitting on top, and my youngest sister then had 5 or 6 months. She was still nursing. So my mother gave her on top on the wagon, nursing her, sitting on everybody, all the men, and we decided to go back. When we came close to Sławków, right before, we heard that the Poles are drowning all the Jews that want to go back, and they knew that a lot of Jews were running away, and they decided to kill them. And a very good Polish man saw my mother with the little children, and he came and he said, "Mrs., don't go this way because they are drowning all the Jewish people, and I see you are Jewish. Come, you will sleep tonight in my house, and the next day I will show you a way not to go through the river." It was very low in Sławków, the river. So he really took us over there. We slept over, and we arrived to Sosnowiec. When we arrived on Sosnowiec, we arrived on Friday. It was only one night that we came back to our apartment. And it was in a new house that my father just finished to build on Stara p1of3. And we were living there on the first floor, but just across, like half a block from us, was from the old Sosnowiec, the biggest synagogue. From our house, from the 3rd floor, you could see the synagogue, just to look. And all of a sudden, in the mid of the night, we started to see a big fire through our windows. And this was our welcome when we came back from Walbrom. We all ran to my mother's bed, I remember like today, and we were sure that our houses will be burned too, because it seemed so close, it was so red all around, and the sparkles were coming. We closed the window, and we said, this is the end. This is the end of the Jewish people. And the next day, nothing happened to our house. We came out of the house and we heard that the synagogue, just the synagogue, no human life was involved in this synagogue. But in the same night was the big synagogue in the other part of Sosnowiec. Then we heard every surrounded city of Sosnowiec, every synagogue what was there, the same night was buried off. So this is how they started the first week of welcome. The minute they entered, my all uncles stayed in Sosnowiec. We were the only one. They were all men gathered wherever they found a man, and they gathered like 7,000 to 8,000 people in one place by Shine in the city. And they terrorized all the people inside this Shine. My uncles were there. When we came, we heard all what they told us, that we were very lucky because my 2 brothers would be taken. They were already grown up, and my father. And they cut off all the beards, and they sent, even nobody had scissors, that they picked up a man. He should run as fast as possible to come back, and one had to cut each other. They kept them for 3 or 4 days without food, and it was just September, very, very hot days. And then after a couple of days, this is what all my uncles told me, what they went through over there. They were living also in Sosnowiec, my father's brothers. And then they wanted to kill the rabbi. They wanted the rabbi, and they couldn't get the rabbi. Nobody gave up the rabbi. Finally, they let them go. Our hell started because, first of all, we couldn't go anymore to school. All the schools were closed, but they opened for the Polish people. They opened like 4 months later, 3 months later.
Was it
for
in
us, never opened.
1939?
What?
About which year was it?
1939. 1939. This was the right September 1939 where they entered. So we knew it's finished. Our store was not supposed to be open anymore. We never opened our store anymore. And we were still living in our house. Then no schooling, and my mother was with the 8 children, and with no books. We went right away. We were supposed to give away all the books we had in our house, no matter in what language it was. Only if somebody had a German book, this book could stay, but no Polish, no Jewish, no Hebrew. And then started after 1939, they started to look for people to go to work, to hard labor work. It started 1940. They started to send away. My parents switched. My brother Menek was very intelligent, and he came with an idea to make batteries, and he started to invent batteries. And he figured out that because it's Verdunklung, which means they are closing the windows all over Germany and all over Europe, that batteries maybe will save us if we will produce batteries. And we started to produce batteries in 1940. And it really helped us like 1 or 2 years, because the Germans were very interested, and they used to come, and they allowed us now later on to open a shop, which was like a factory, a small factory. We engaged a lot of people in this, and we started to produce the batteries. Until 1940, my brothers didn't go to labor camp because we were producing the batteries, and we were productive for the Germans. But the torture started with the ration of bread. It started to be very scarce food, and now a year or a year and a half later, they said that we have to leave our house, and they put us at the very small streets from Sosnowiec, and this was the start of the ghetto. So we were put with the 8 children, with another family, in one room and a kitchen on Chasna. And very little streets were given as the start of the ghetto. We were living over there in one room with the other family in the kitchen. So we were all 8 together, grown-up children. My oldest brother was then nearly 20, and the youngest was a baby. And my mother decided never to stop nursing until the war will stop. She saw that the hunger starts. So she nursed the little girl until 2 years old. But then that was it. And we were living in this little ghetto until they decided to take us all out. And meantime, in 1942, they made a general gathering of all the Jews from all over around Sosnowiec. And they gave in Sosnowiec one place which was called the p1of3. It was a field, a sport field on Aleja. And they gave time that from 6 o'clock in the morning, every Jew has to present itself, because new ID card will be given to each person, and whoever will not have such an ID card will be right away sent to Auschwitz. By then we already knew that Auschwitz exists, because people used to talk about this, and the German people that supervised the big factories gave the rumors, if they were in good relationship with the owners, that by all means they should do anything not to be deported, because nobody will come alive from there. And this is how we found out. And in that day, it was August the 12th, 1942. I remember vividly like today. My mother said to us, put on the most beautiful dresses, all of you, because first of all we have to be presentable. And we put my little sister, which was by then 3 years old, not yet 3 years old, a white dress. And my only sister decided she'd rather be shot and killed and found, and she will not go to this gathering, no matter what. She closed up herself in the apartment and she didn't go. She was the only one who didn't go with us. 7 of us went with my mother. We arrived around 7. We wanted to be from the first. And exactly in that day, there was no more ghetto. There was no more restriction. You wear the armband because we were told right away to put the white bands when shortly after they arrived, and to wear the Jude here. And in that day, they couldn't care less if you were wearing the band, you were wearing the Jude. All the streets in Sosnowiec were open. As we should come as fast as possible to this gathering place. And nobody was even wondering. They said probably they want to change the ID, and people should be sure that they are staying in Sosnowiec. We arrived, nothing was suspicious around the field. We didn't see the German outside at all. We entered the gate, and after an hour and a half, the field was full, and we were over 20,000 people in one place, because this was the only place where they gathered us. We were 25,000 Jews in Sosnowiec. So partially they already sent before to Auschwitz a lot, to labor camp a lot. So whatever was left, like 20,000, maybe 22, we gathered in this particular place. As we arrived, all of a sudden, we saw all the gates are closing, and the assessments are moving in, like from nowhere, and through this gate and through the fence, it was wooden gate. We saw like the trucks, green trucks, are surrounding all the field. Then we saw that something is not in order, that we might never come out of this place, but we never knew what's going on. After we came without food, we came without covering. It was a very hot day. My little sister was wearing little white dress, embroidered. I was wearing light clothes because it was August the 12th. And in 4 or 5 hours later, we saw that big, long table are coming into our place. And through the microphones, there were announcements. Any family with children should go to the right. Any young people from this and this age should go to the left. Any women that don't have husbands and have children should go to different angle. And all of a sudden, after a very short time, we were divided like in 5 divisions. And a lot of assessment came in. And my mother said, this is probably the end. We are 7 children. We will never come out. They will deport us from them. The night fell down, and it was very dark. It was the first night. We spent 2 nights over there.
Where was your father at this time?
What?
Where was your father at this time?
My father, my 2 older brothers, and we were all together.
Are you all together?
All together. The only one who was not with us was my older sister. We called her Layusha, Lillian. She stayed home alone. She maybe got this energy and the spirit. She belonged to a Zionistic organization which was called Hanoar Hatzioni. And maybe she got it. I didn't belong to an organization. Maybe I didn't have her spirit and her belief in this, what she said. She'd rather be killed or dead or whatever. Maybe she will survive, maybe she will fight, maybe she will go to a underground. She stayed home. So my mother was 7 children with my father. When the night fell down, all of a sudden they didn't put up lights, and they had 20,000 people around. They weren't prepared for a night of lighting. And all of a sudden we saw people with ladders going around and bringing up artificial light, big reflectors, big lights that should spot us, spotlights. And my mother got an idea. She said, do you know what? I see everybody who works by something can move, but these people are wearing white bands. She said, we will tear off the white dress of my little sister, put on the white band, all three of you, and walk out. The child started to cry. She was without the dress, but we couldn't. We covered her with whatever. My mother took her right away to her. We tore off. We put the three bands on my father. Nobody should see it. My father walked by the fence, and when they were putting up the big reflectors, my father with my two brothers were holding the ladder already, and all of a sudden they look around and they walked from the section where the children were with the women. They walked away as workers. Few hours before, we threw out our sister Judy through the fence. We said maybe she will be lucky, and that particular we looked around through the spaces of the fence, and we didn't see, like in a big space, any car. We pushed her up and we pushed her out. She should run away. She was then 10 years old, 10 years old, 10, not yet 11 years old, Judy. And we didn't know any more about her. So my father with the two brothers, and now Judy and my sister there, so four. My mother stayed with the four. I was the oldest from the small one. We were sitting and by the fence. We didn't move. My mother was scared she would lose the small children because my little brother was 7 years old. My older sister Marisha was 9 or 10 years, I get confused, 11, 12 years old. She was older than Julie. And the little baby, which was 3 years old. And I stick to my mother. All of a sudden, my mother said, we will never come alive. Let's go push forward. Maybe I will see. And the Jewish militia, the German engaged Jewish people to help them to watch that people shouldn't run from one section to the other section, because we were already divided. Automatically, when they announced, we followed the instruction. So my mother, she was a very brave woman. She was very intelligent and very brave woman. She said, you know, we will never go alive. We don't know how long we will stay. Let's move. Maybe people know me. Maybe somebody will recognize me. They will help me to take out one of the children, one by one, that I shouldn't have four. We moved in front, but she lost me. I was, for some reason, I got lost, and she moved with the three children the next day. It was pouring, it was raining, and we were without food, we were without bread, the screams and the cry, no facilities. Wherever anybody was standing, this were the facilities of a bathroom. So we were like a mess, 20,000 people in one place, the screaming. Children were looking for mothers, mothers were looking for children, husbands were looking because the pushing, nobody could stay on one place. We were very squeezed. There was everything congested. My mother pushed herself out, and she was just like in the front because around the table of the assessment, there was the Jewish committee, the whole Jewish committee. We had a Jewish committee in the city of Sosnovitz that helped, for some reason, to bring the transports that the Germans demanded. They supplied them, and always went, unfortunately, the poor people first. And whoever had still money or had some gold or something, because we had to give away everything to the German. But sometimes, you know, we always have hidden something for the black hour. And unless that there was a razzia was that the German came out all of a sudden to the ghetto, to the suburbs of the streets, knocked at every door, took out the people, regardless who you were, poor or rich or healthy or young. They needed a contingent of 10,000 because it was demanded, and it was a surprise, and everybody the next day. day we didn't even know how many people disappeared. That moment when my mother approached the front, she was hoping she will see a man by the name Lewartowski, which he made us a lot of favor to save my brother not to go to the concentration camp, to save my father, and she hoped that maybe now she will see him, maybe she will send a note or something. And she had the guts to come in front of an SS man, to fall down to his feet, to hold his feet and beg him. That's all what I have. Please, let me live. Let me live. I just lost in the crowd my only child. You will be blessed. And this is how she talked with the people told me. He looked at her. He said, pick up yourself. Where is your other child? And my mother was sure that they will shoot her or whatever. And he told to her, it was a miracle, 1 in 20,000 people over there. And he told to her, take your children and go out. So she told him, but how can I go out? I still have one, and she lost me. She said, go on the table, take something. This is how I have to say the truth, how it was, how she saved us. Otherwise, everybody, nearly his children, nobody survived. They were all sent to Auschwitz. From this place, 10,000 people were deported that day. And my mother stood up and the screaming of my name, Basia, went all over the place. And until I heard, and I knew that I lost my mother, but I didn't know how to. And then I said, I am Basia. I started to scream, and the people started to help me. They knew that something is going on, and they pushed me through. And he told to my mother, if you said the lie, you will be shot on the spot. They brought me to the front, and I ran to her. I said, Mother, I lost you. And then my mother got off the table, took me by the hand, and walked out with me. This was a miracle above miracles, because I don't know anybody with 7 children walked out from this place. And then after this, we went back, and the people were sent, and they lodged them in the school where I attended my elementary school. It was on Dęblińska. All the people, after 3 days, were marching through the street. The street were closed up. We saw them marching directly, and then some people were still probably taken out, but the rest were all deported to Auschwitz. From that place, we knew that our situation is going really worse and worse, that we have very little chances to survive. But then my father decided maybe we will buy foreign papers. And we started to work in this direction to get through Paraguay, through Uruguay. And it didn't come because they discovered it, and a lot of people who planned on the same situation never got to it. Then they took us from this ghetto. Would you like something else until this point?
No, this is fine.
This was the ghetto in Sosnowiec. And in 1942, they decided they will close up all the city of Sosnowiec, and they will bring us to a little suburb of Sosnowiec, which was called Środula. And this was the real ghetto. This was little houses from the farmers, and Sosnowiec was divided in 2 parts. Like the Sosnowiec, they put on Upper Środula, and Będzin, another little city, 4 miles from us, or 5 miles from us, from where my father was born, and my grandparents lived over there. They had a different ghetto. We couldn't see them. We couldn't move. As the war started, we stopped all the communication only through policia or militia, or letters, or somebody from committee. We couldn't communicate with no cities around. We were really like completely separated. Then they took us to the Środula, and Środula was called the small Środula and the big Środula. The big Shrodula belonged to the city of Sosnovitz. But because we developed a big factory of the batteries, as I told you, and my father engaged mostly young children, he wanted to save them. Some survive, and they are alive today. One of them is in Canada. They had a gathering in Israel, and they mentioned my father's name, that he's really saved a lot of children. He said that this work can only be done by children because it was very precise to make the batteries inside. And because we switched to be close to my grandparents and we have connection, and the fiancé of my sister, she was engaged to my father's brother, came from Bendin, he decided we should go to the Shrodula that belonged to this town of Bendin, no more Sosnovitz. So we never heard any more from my family from Sosnovitz. We were brought to the small, like a valley, and Bendin had two ghettos, Kamionka and a small Shrodula. We were given one room with another family again, and these were very small rooms, and we lived over there, daily going to work, to the city, coming back. But the biggest disaster always happened that when we left for work, we never knew if we will come back, if we will find somebody still in the house. Because what the German did, very often now in Shrodula, whenever men went to work or young people work, if they needed a transport of 1,000 people or 500 people, they came to the ghetto, surrounded houses, took out anybody who was there, small or big, regardless, all the sick people, all the old people, whoever was at hand. Because, by the way, I want to mention that I witnessed, before I went to Shrodula, before I was sent, they took out small babies from the hospital. Why I know this? We lived on old Sosnovitz, and this is where the only hospital was, and the only orphanage was, where we lived. And if somebody wanted to go, it was the main street, Piłsudskiego, where we lived before we moved. And trucks were going, and the screaming of little newborn baby. Then we found out they picked up 80 newborn babies. I saw it bundled down in white sheets in big trucks moving along the street. And in the same time, in the same hour, they went to the orphanage, and it was like counted. A baby was counted as a person. So this is how they took the babies from the hospital and the whole orphanage in the same day. When we came to Shrodula, my parents decided maybe we should sleep in the factory. We shouldn't go back to the ghetto whenever we can and nobody will find us. Many times we did it. Many times we couldn't because we heard that they will inspect factories. And the condition over there were very bad because this is granite. It's black like coal that you make the batteries. And if we slept over there during the night, the dust went up and we came out like chimney men. So we were all black around. So this was a big problem because nobody should have known in the factory that we slept over there, because we made believe that we are living, like, because we were the owner, we lived the last one, and we closed it up. My father had the key, and the German, they were called them Treuhändler, the supervisor. They bought off slowly the factory, they became owner, and they were in good relation because they were bright a lot, they got a lot of gold from people, money, the produced money they took, nobody checked them, and we sent to Germany these batteries. We couldn't do it too long. The hunger was really getting to the Shrodula. We could only get on special coupons food contingent. You could get a piece of bread in 2 days, a little bit sugar, but we had the running water, which was already blessing. When we are, I don't know how, okay. So we spent the days in ghetto with all children. We didn't go away to play. We didn't have toys. We didn't have books. We couldn't do anything. We were sitting to each other or taking a stone and moving it, the small children. We moved from Sosnowiec to the ghetto only with hand baggage. We were told not to take nothing more. So we took our covers. They allowed us to take, like everyone could take a cover, but and whatever we could carry. We weren't given trucks or anything, and then we should move on. In that time, we arrived. The farmers left their beds because the farmers have gotten our apartments. They moved the farmers, the Polish people, the Volksdeutsch were the Poles that decided to become German citizen. So they got better food, and they report a lot of Jews because they got rewarded. And everybody was scared now. We didn't know now who is the spy, who is the Polish people, because they lived in the same apartment, in the same houses, but they took the ID as partially German. And if they had already grown-up children, they had to send them to the army. But they stayed home with good food. They could buy things like the German. It was really very privileged for them. But it started our disaster for the Jews, because they were really spying on every move. We couldn't go out if a child, my mother sometimes wanted to send out a child to a Polish family that knew us for a piece of bread. We were scared that the next door neighbor, who became a German associate, will give out, and the Polish family could be really punished very severely. So it cut off our all resources of help. Underground, it couldn't, only the Jewish organization were giving out a lot of pamphlets to resist, not to come to the transport, not to report, not to cooperate, and to sabotage, to put in shoes many little notes when it's packed, that the German people should find it. Any possible the youth organization they could do to make a resistance, which the Jewish committee were very much against them. This is the truth, because they were scared that they might say that they cooperate with them, and the Jewish committee stretched our being as much as possible, which Sosnowiec was maybe very lucky, because they sent a lot of people to the labor camp, and you have a lot of people that really, some survived the labor camp. Otherwise they would be now guests in Auschwitz. So in that case, we couldn't follow up the resistance too much, because there was no help whatsoever from the Polish people. They really had to struggle to buy for any means they had. And we decided we are sleeping as much as we can in the factories, and the rest we have to come back to the Środula ghetto. It was Saturday, I remember vividly, like today, on Środula, the small Środula. We were outside, it was a beautiful day, but there were some rumors that the Jewish militia were coming down from the upper Środula. They had a path, that there was a communication between the police, Jewish police downstairs, and Jewish police from upstairs. We people couldn't move. We could only have a special permit. If you were a doctor or something, that's only or from a committee that you could move from one ghetto to the other. And it was very strange, because we saw when the night, it wasn't yet a night, we saw all the lightning coming out from the upper Shrodula. And this was the station where the German police were staying. And it was very suspicious that something is going on, because never before we saw so much lightning. And the rumors that came to our ghetto, we saw that something must be true. We decided that night that we put guard on the roofs, that every man who still was in the house, which were not too many left, mostly were deported or mostly were in labor camp, but whoever was left, and one was my brother that went on the roof. We didn't have ammunition in the ghetto. We didn't have this, but just to guard what's going on, because we built, most of us built bunkers, a hiding place. We built 2 hiding places in Little Shrodula, where we were. One, if we will not be lucky enough to run outside and to go to the basement. So we made like a covered wall it was like an attic. We covered the attic with a piece of furniture. And we said, if we are lucky to hide over there, this was not a good hiding. It could be seen from outside because it had a little window, and they could count that there is a hiding. We built downstairs in a very, very dark basement. It was my brother Lolek and my brother Maniek, a bunker. They were like small division. Each room had probably was big, like 4